First of all, I'd just like to thank everybody who has joined us up to this point. No doubt some more people will roll in as we go on. But for now, let's just kick it off with some simple introductions. So my name is Dara. I'm going to be your presenter today, and I am the commercial director here at Virtuagym, specifically with regards to the North American market. So essentially, it's my job to ensure that both our marketing and our sales teams are aligned to achieve, I guess, three things. The first one is to ensure that our message is getting out there. The second one is to ensure that people actually care about the message that we're sending out. And then the last one, of course, is that the message that we're putting out is kind of inspiring and motivating people to take action, which is also, not coincidentally enough, the topic of today's training and how to do that through Facebook. So a little bit of background. At Virtuagym, we've been using Facebook advertising for probably about 10 years. And despite the fact that we are a technology company, we produce an app for fitness centers, gyms, studios, personal trainers. We do also work with a number of our clients on improving their own Facebook marketing campaigns. And what we've kind of noticed is often it's a little bit repetitive in the sense that to be successful, probably in any competitive endeavor, it really boils down to your ability to execute the fundamentals well. And while it is true that success can come from innovation, even in those cases, that innovation and that execution of the innovation is really founded on well executed fundamentals. Now, before we go any further, a little bit of marketing inception. We are hosting this webinar in order to get our Referral Network program out there. I'll keep it short and brief. It's not why you're here, but essentially we're offering up to $500 for introductions. So if you know anybody in the industry who might be in need of an app and you like the idea of earning an extra few hundred or even few $1,000s a month, feel free to take a look at the link there, referrafriendus.virtuagym.com. That's as much as I'll speak about this until the very end. It's not what you're here for, but just so you know that it's out there. So one of the big motivations in hosting this webinar today is that marketing is repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, reported as one of the biggest challenges for small to medium sized businesses, right? Over the years, it has become an incredibly and complex topics, and that honestly, it intimidates a lot of business owners, those that are looking to grow at least. But from our perspective and our experience, it doesn't really need to be that way. The fundamentals of marketing are actually very, very simple to understand and to apply, and they haven't actually changed over the last, I don't know, 50 or 100 years. What has changed is really the technology. And when I talk about the technology, I mean that behind marketing, so all these different platforms that you can market on or use to market on these different platforms, but also the technology behind how businesses can deliver value to their clients. You know, I mean, 20 years ago, if you wanted a personal trainer, you'd look in your gym or in your local area. And these days, your personal trainer doesn't even need to be in the same continent. And some people would argue that it doesn't even need to be human these days. So while the marketing fundamentals changed, or while the marketing fundamentals haven't changed, how we market and how precisely and aggressively that we need to market has changed quite drastically. Now, the other motivation behind this webinar, this training today, is essentially the acknowledgement that in times of uncertainty and doubt and economic decline, like we're in now, small businesses tend to stop advertising. And it makes sense, right? Marketing budget is always going to be the first port of call when you're looking to reduce expenses. The logic is pretty stable. Businesses, they want to focus on sustaining or even surviving during difficult times. But the thing is that unfortunately for many, many businesses, that's actually the wrong step. Both Forbes and HBR, Harvard Business Review, and many other publications have reported that businesses that actually either maintain or increase their marketing spend during these difficult times will have a higher chance of surviving and even thriving after the difficult times pass. So the big question to that is, well, why? How does that make sense? And the answer is pretty obvious. It's because all the other businesses are stopping to do their marketing. So effectively, your marketing effort becomes cheaper. People who continue marketing, they get more bang for their buck. And at the same time, recessions and times of doubt don't impact all consumers the same either. So a lot of consumers, they will continue to spend. And so with less competition and cheaper ads, the more marketing savvy businesses, shall we say, are able to kind of cast a wider net and attract those customers. And here is the clincher. That ends up having an ongoing effect because consumers that aren't impacted by a recession today aren't likely to be impacted in the next recession, meaning that if a business can bring them on as a customer in a difficult time, they're less likely to be impacted by the next recession or the next difficult time. Effectively, and it sounds pretty blatantly stupid, but the financial viability of a company is almost entirely determined by the financial viability of its consumers. So the question that we're going to look at today is, okay, well, that's all great in theory, not great, but what exactly are we going to do about it? And so today we're going to be looking at this agenda. Essentially, we're going to start with the basics that you need to know before you do any sort of marketing effort. And then we're going to move into what's typically known as the RMFC approach, RMF, reach, messaging, frequency. We're not going to be looking at the C channel because this training today is going to be focused entirely on Facebook. So Facebook will be the channel of choice. So to get started with the basics, there are 3 elements that we need to understand about marketing before we can do anything on marketing. And the first one is buyer profiles. Now, this might sound very, very simple and again, obvious, but you would be surprised how many people who are looking to grow haven't actually taken the time to understand who are the people that we're trying to sell to, who are the people that are going to get most value out of our product. And so their marketing efforts are always going to be a little bit limp because they don't have that clear direction. So before you can do anything related to marketing, you need to answer that question. Who are they and why would they want your service? And the more specific and detailed you are here, the better. And honestly, everything that we look at is going to be a waste of time if you don't sit down and actually write these out and think about them. The next step after thinking about what I guess you would call your ideal customer profile is to ask the question, who else can you deliver value to? Because while the goal is to be specific about who we want to work with, we also want to cast a broad enough net that we can later let Facebook do a lot of analysis in to identify who is most likely to sign up. So we don't want to let our assumptions or presumptions limit our ability to grow as a company. We want to kind of have a broad definition of who we're willing to work with and then actually start doing market analysis in real time to identify who our best customer base is and who we can grow the most with. So the goal is to have between generally, I would say 5 and 10 profiles by the end of this exercise of people that you can work with. In all honesty, it's the more the merrier, as long and entirely on the condition that you can actually deliver value to these potential customers. Once we have our buyer profiles down, we then need to understand the buyer journey or the marketing funnel, because not everybody who fits into these profiles is going to end up being a customer. Some of them will never arrive at this action point where they actually take action and purchase your product. And the reason is simply everybody's on their own journey. People in reality are on hundreds, if not thousands, of these different buyer journeys where they could potentially purchase different tools or softwares or solutions or fitness services or whatever it might be. And so not everybody is going to make it towards the end. Our goal and what we're going to be delegating to Facebook is really to identify these 3 stages. So the interest, the desire, and the action stages, so that we can use them as our target audience in our marketing campaigns. And that's where we're going to see most of our success. Now, the next and third thing that we're going to cover in the Marketing 101 basic section is that marketing at its core is actually incredibly simple. And marketing on Facebook at its core is incredibly simple. That's not to say it can't get complex, but if you break it down and simplify it, it's actually very, very straightforward. It composes of 3 things. The first thing is your reach. The second is the messaging that you're putting out there. And the last one is the frequency. And the reach is simply kind of how many people are going to fall into those three stages that we spoke about. The messaging is how are you going to inspire action? What are you going to put out there about your brand, about your offering that's going to incentivize people to take advantage of it? And then the last one is frequency. Predominantly because we don't live in a perfect world, it's unlikely that the first message you put out there is going to get a response or a positive response. And so in marketing, persistence is absolutely key. So these three elements are effectively going to be the agenda for the rest of the webinar, or the rest of the training. And we're going to start with reach. Now, for those of you already familiar with the Facebook pixel, you'll probably know most of what we're going to talk about, at least at the start here. But for those of you who haven't heard of it before, it's very, very simple. And the best way to think about it is, imagine you hire a new employee, and that employee's only job is to watch your website, watch the visitors that come to your website, watch the actions they take, so the buttons they click, the pages they visit on your website. And it sits there, your employee sits there for a month or 2 months and collects all this data and then reports it back to Facebook. And he instructs Facebook of, hey, over the last month, we've had 100 visitors. Out of those 100 visitors, 2 of them clicked the button that I want them to click. Can you look at your entire database of users and find more people like these 2 visitors? And then Facebook will do that analysis, and then moving forward, you can focus on that kind of profile. And that's exactly what the Facebook pixel does. So it's a piece of code that lives on your website. It observes your visitors and reports back to the Facebook database, so that Facebook can find more of your best visitors to show ads to in the future. It's very, very simple to set up and install, especially if you're using a tool like Wix or Shopify or any of these kind of off-the-shelf website providers. They'll often have a way to simply install it. If you have something a little bit more complex, like a custom website or WordPress, maybe that you're not super familiar with, to install it by hand only takes about 30 minutes. So whoever manages your website should be able to do it regardless of how your website is hosted. So here's the thing. Like any new employee, the Facebook pixel needs to be trained before it can do its job properly. And this is where people make their first mistake when it comes to Facebook marketing. They either don't train the Facebook pixel or they end up training it in the wrong way. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but while your goal in using Facebook ads might be to get more people to sign up to your service, that shouldn't actually be the goal of your first ad campaign. Why? Because we don't just want the Facebook pixel to learn about the people who are ready to buy now, the people who are in this action stage. We want the Facebook pixel to learn about all these people who show any sort of interest or desire around your service, around your product. Plus, from a technical perspective, if you start off just trying to get the Facebook pixel to find people who will buy your product or service, it won't have enough data to really find those people, and so it'll end up showing your ads to anybody and everybody, which will potentially cost you money. So how do you actually train the Facebook pixel so it doesn't just look for these action people, but look for all of these interest people? Well, when you're first set up your Facebook campaign, set your target audience so that it encompasses all those profiles that we made earlier. You spent the time, you sat down, you wrote about them. Let's put them into Facebook in the form of your first custom audience. And this entire group of potential buyers is going to be your starting point for analysis. Next, what you need to do is to, instead of setting your conversion objective to purchase, you need to set it as view content, or essentially website visits. And what this will do is it means that anybody who sees your very first ad, they have a low barrier to engage with that ad. They don't need to buy anything. You're not asking them to buy anything. You're just asking them to visit your website. And then Facebook will say, hey, this person is either interested, desired, or wants to take action. And therefore, I'm going to find more people like this person. And so you're going to start building your custom audience of people who are interested, not just people who want to buy. By the way, if you do want to expand so that you also want to encounter everybody who's aware and pull them into an audience that you can market, we'll talk about that later, you can market to, you can have an even lower barrier to engage with your ad. So maybe instead of your ad asking people to click on it to go to your website, it actually automatically plays a video so that people just need to stop and watch the video 25% or 50% of the way. And then Facebook will say, okay, this person is definitely aware of the brand, so we'll pile them into our custom audience so that we can start marketing to them later. Whichever way you decide to do it, once you have your broad but relevant custom audience that you've allowed the Facebook pixel to evaluate, and you're ready to start selling your service or your product, it's time now to start actually figuring out your messaging. So our goal in messaging is to essentially target those people who are most ready to buy. So while we have a database of people who are just interested, what we're going to try and do is get the low-hanging fruit first and foremost, and then we'll talk about the others in a later section. So our initial messaging is about trying to get people to buy. Now, trying to plan and execute the perfect marketing messaging strategy is really a thing of the past, right? So 50 years ago, it was, you know, weeks, months of brainstorming, of writing drafts, of client pitches, of revisions, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas today, it's a whole lot easier to find your perfect messaging. The process for doing it, it's all about quick iterations. So a lot of testing, a lot of failing, but eventual success if you stick with it. And the reason we can do this process today is essentially it's Facebook and other platforms make it a whole lot cheaper to reach your target audience. And also because they exist, you can get your messaging to people much faster to test how they react to it. So with the design, test, and review, you essentially want to be doing this every 1 to 2 weeks, going in, looking at your ads and observing how effective they are. So to help with this process, Facebook has a tool known as A/B testing or split testing or A/B split testing. What that essentially allows you to do is to create one ad and then say, you know what, I'm not 100% confident about the image, if that image is going to capture people's eyes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to test this ad with 2 images. And then Facebook will go off and it'll test the ad with 2 images or with 2 titles or 2 headers or 2 links, 2 calls to actions, whatever it might be. And then we'll report back to you, hey, this one is more successful. You should continue your next advertising campaign using this image. And this brings us then to the second mistake that people make when they're setting up their Facebook ad campaigns. Now I'm going to show you an example of a Facebook ad, and I'm going to pause, take a much needed glass of water, and give you an opportunity to kind of look at it and evaluate it and think, what are some of the pros and the cons about this ad? So without talking about this specific ad necessarily, a bad marketing ad or marketing campaign will consist of ads that A, speak too much about the product or service, B, they're too generic to actually resonate with your target audience, and 3, this is a hot topic, they include discounts. Now, don't get me wrong, discounts and promotions, they are powerful tools when used correctly, and that's the caveat. They are not in and of themselves a marketing or sales strategy or some sort of like ultimate play to win conversions or win customers. And when you're starting out with your initial messaging, you should definitely avoid them. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you think about what it takes for somebody to arrive at that point to make a purchasing decision, it requires 2 things. It requires a desire to purchase your product or your service, and it requires the ability to purchase your product or your service. So they must want it, and there can't be any blockers to them having it. Sounds super obvious and intuitive, But when we then look at discounts and what do discounts actually solve? Well, they solve this over here, the barriers to purchase. If somebody can't purchase because of price, a discount will support them. But or initial messaging, we're trying to just get people to want to buy our product. If they don't want it, it doesn't matter if it's 100% off. They're not going to take it. They have to invest time in using it, and they're not going to want it. Now, just a caveat of that and a bit of a side note, sales psychology does tell us that even if price isn't an issue for people, they will be more motivated to purchase if there's a discount, and especially if it's a time-sensitive one and it creates urgency. But equally, at the same time, that doesn't negate the fact that buyers must still have a strong desire to buy your service first. So when we talk about messaging, especially our initial messaging, the first message that people are going to see about our product or service, we want to be tackling their desire to purchase and ignoring for now, more or less, their ability to purchase. So how do we do that? Well, it's a very simple concept called what's in it for me. And essentially that means that your messaging should explain the benefits for the buyer. And it should do that in an emotional sort of way. So for example, you might think that the benefit of somebody signing up with you, somebody like myself who maybe needs your service, needs to lose a few pounds, the benefit might be live a healthier life or lose weight, where those are objective and rational benefits. They're not necessarily emotional ones. Maybe the emotional ones for me would be being more confident when I'm out at a party, or feeling good naked. Something as simple as that, but something that might evoke an emotional reaction in me. Again, not hinting that I don't feel good naked, but it could be a good example of kind of an emotional pull. So if we go back to our initial ad and then contrast it with something that focuses less on the ability to purchase and really heavily focuses on the desire to purchase, you can see another example here. And I'll give you a second to kind of read through it and look at it and recognize how it's different. So there are a couple of key differences here. The first one you'll immediately recognize is there's no discount or anything of that sort. Instead, it's trying to get an emotional message across. And you can tell just by reading the ad at who the ad is directed to, right? It's directed at fathers who are overweight, maybe not super confident that they're setting the right example for their young kids. It's very specific. And when somebody reads that, who fits that demographic or is in that audience, they will feel like it was written for them. And so that will pull an emotion from them and more inspire them to take action on how they're feeling. And of course, they just need to click a button. So you're the most convenient way to do that. So both these messages, while they imply the same outcome of getting fit, they evoke very different reactions. You know, the first is more of kind of a logical, can I buy this? But all the do I want to buy something like this is left before the ad, and it's just kind of hoping that the person is at that stage. Where the second ad is actually trying to move somebody to that action stage by pulling on an emotion. So similar superficial benefits, but the emotional benefits are much stronger in the second ad. So make sure that your messaging, at least your initial messaging, the first ad people see about your business, tells an emotional story where possible. And again, just going back to this, I'm kind of giving quick rules about this, but at the end of the day, it's all about testing. And Facebook has the tools. If you look at how to do A/B testing, it's quite simple and straightforward. Everything is about experimenting in 1 to 2 week cycles, learning what works for you, for your customer base, for the product, the service that you're selling. So also at this point, it's probably fair to set expectations of what does it look like if you have an incredible ad and it's super effective. In reality, we're not talking about massive numbers here. The global average across all industries for Facebook click-through rates, so how many people see an ad and actually go to the website through clicking on the ad, is like 0.98%. And then in the fitness industry, I believe it's like 1.01%. Um, so again, we're not talking about huge numbers, but if you're getting anything over 1.05, 1.1, even 1.2, you're doing incredibly well. Likewise, if you're under, let's say, 0.9 or 0.8%, you probably have a lot of work and should be going in completely different directions, trying to figure out what's going to work best for you. But again, 1%, consider that your baseline. So that's the 1% of people who do click through. What about the other 99%? That's where we're going to start looking at our frequency side of things. So, okay, they didn't respond to the first ad. Are we going to give up on them? No, absolutely not. We're going to continue to work with these people to see what's going to work for them. And so we're going to apply the desire to purchase and the ability to purchase concept again. And we're going to look at it and evaluate it, make some assumptions that people who are in our demographic, who fit our buyer profiles, we know there's value for them, but they saw our ad and they still decided not to convert onto the website. So they either did that because the desire to purchase wasn't strong enough or the ability to purchase wasn't strong enough. So if we take a look at desire to purchase, there might be some reasons that they saw the ad and it didn't inspire them. The first one is easy to dismiss. Maybe I'll kind of explain this one in a little bit more detail. Back when I was 16, I was 220 pounds. I'm 5'7", so 220 pounds is a pretty big number. By the time I was 18 or 19, I was 155, 160 pounds, so I'd lost quite a reasonable amount of weight. But the question is why? Because I had been obese for all of my, early teenage years, probably my childhood too, but I don't recollect all that much. But it was only really when my weight became a frequent topic of conversation within my family that I was like, okay, enough is enough. I got to do something about this. So while it was initially easy to dismiss, just the frequency of the conversation and the frequency of having to evaluate my situation eventually pushed me to a point where I had to act on it. The second one there is not enough brand trust. So remember, this is the first time people are seeing your brand. So they might like the idea of it. Maybe your message really hit and it actually inspired them to act, but it didn't inspire them to act with you. So in these instances, there's a couple of things that you can do. One is actually frequency alone will help this. So brand recognition naturally relates to brand trust. The more people recognize your brand, the more that they'll trust it without you doing anything else except for making it more common in their face. The other element, you can be more strategic with it. So probably the better approach of while getting your brand there is also to start building that trust with them. And there's a few ways you can do that. So you can, for example, start marketing customer or client testimonials to them so that they see other people in their situation who had success with you. And it's much easier for people to relate to a customer than the business. So sharing that, also demonstrating the high value of service that you offer through some other means. So maybe you can share some really high quality, very well produced workout plans or nutrition plans or just workout videos, something that shows a high level of professionalism that will then build that sense of trust for your customers. The other example is maybe the message just didn't resonate. Maybe you just completely missed the mark, which is fine too and will certainly happen. In these instances, your goal is just really to experiment with new messaging and see if any new messages, new value propositions, new benefits and outcomes, new emotions work better for your target market. On the ability to purchase side of things, maybe your product or service was too expensive. Maybe they went to the website, but they didn't buy anything because they saw the pricing and they got scared off by the pricing. Obviously, in these instances, a discount is perfectly acceptable if you want to retarget somebody with a discount. And it's actually going to be much more effective here because now that they've seen the base price, they understand what the pricing is. Now the discount actually means something. They know that they're actually saving money. Another element is maybe that they don't have the time, which is probably one of the largest blockers for people kind of getting into fitness, at least in terms of an excuse, as they don't have the time. So maybe you want to start explaining the convenience of your service. Maybe you do online coaching, maybe you do hybrid of online and in person. They only need to see you once a week, once a month. Maybe you have something to solve that, and then you can start remarketing that. These are just a couple of examples. In reality, it's going to depend on your buyer profile. So sitting down and looking at, okay, I'm targeting high-level college athletes, and therefore time is probably going to be a concern. College students, they're not professional athletes, so they're not getting paid for it. Maybe money is going to be a concern. So I'm going to focus my remarketing efforts on the ability to purchase. Or maybe you're targeting 50 somethings who are well off, retired early, highly successful. Maybe for them, it's just easier to dismiss. They're already successful in life. They're happy with how things have gone and how things are going. So maybe they're just dismissing the urgency of it. So maybe I need to reiterate my message in different ways, or just make it more frequent. So regardless of how you decide that your second or your follow-up messaging should be, Facebook has a tool, of course, to support you in delivering it. So Facebook has the concept of retargeting. So basically, it will identify people who have seen your ads, who have clicked on your ads, visited your website, maybe purchased, whatever it might be, and it'll store them into another custom audience so that you can go back and say, okay, didn't hit the first time with these people, let me send new messages and see what's effective. This is the third most common mistake people make when it comes to Facebook marketing, and that is they try and make it too broad. They try and make it too general. So in Facebook, you can, for example, select all visitors to your website, and I would say this is probably the #1 way people remarket, but it's not specific enough. The pixel has collected all this data of how the people have actually acted and behaved on your page, or your website, what pages they've gone to, what buttons they've clicked, and you can actually be more specific in how you're going to target people. So, for example, you could set it up so that anybody who visited your pricing page and then left to the website, you're going to retarget them with a discount. Anybody who visited the client testimonials page and left, you're going to retarget them with more testimonials. Maybe you even have you have broken your website down by goals. So people who want to lose weight, go to this page. People who want to improve athletic performance, go to this page. People who want bodybuilding training, go to this page. So you can actually identify what that person's goal was in visiting your page so that you can then retarget them with more specific elements. So essentially the point here and the mistake to avoid here is that the Facebook pixel has a whole amount of data on how people are interacting and what their goals are when they're coming to your page, especially if your website is styled and designed that way. So leverage that information to really tailor your follow-up messaging with people and to make sure that it resonates. And this more or less brings us to the end of the training section. The key takeaways here really are, nothing comes easy and nothing comes without preparation. So actually sit down and write your buyer profiles and know who you're supposed to be targeting. Once you then translate them into Facebook, train the pixel on how to actually reach those people moving forward. Also experiment with your messaging. Your first message should always try to be an emotional one. And then your follow-up, your retargeting efforts can then start digging away at the different reasons that the initial message didn't hit, and you'll have more data as a result. So at this stage, I do want to kind of add in this quote: the only difference between success and failure is the ability to take action. A lot of people that we work with have great ambitions to grow, but you follow up with them a week or a month later and nothing's really taken off the ground. And it's sad because there's a lot of value out there and a lot of businesses are offering a lot of value. And just taking that initial step to learn and to just do something, even though you know that you're going to fail, is the first step to actually being successful in these elements. So I'm going to pause there and we're going to jump into the questions. Okay, so one of the questions is then asking about conversions on when somebody goes to your website, what's the actual conversion for that person to then make a purchase? So it's going to depend on the product as well as the pricing that you have. And again, you'll know from experimentation, but typically you should be looking from anywhere from 2 to 4% of people to complete the action. So we're going to wrap up. I do want to follow up with just a reminder of the referral network. It's as simple as if you know somebody who is looking for a mobile app to either increase retention or increase revenue, new ways of selling elements to their member base, you can send them to us. And if they become a customer, we'll pay up to $500 for a gym, $300 for a studio, $150 for a personal trainer. And if you'd like to learn more, there should be a poll popping up on your screen now that you can fill in, and we'll reach out to you. With that all said and done, we're a little bit early, which is good because the sun is still up here, so I'll get some time on the balcony. And yeah, I'd like to thank everybody here for giving us your time today. And if anybody has any kind of questions or anything, we're going to be following up in a PDF form with this presentation, so you'll have all that, and you'll also have our email addresses.